Well, we have 7 members.
Sounds like a quorum to me.
Sounds like we're gonna begin.
I say go.
So let's begin. I'll bring the August 8th, 2022 Morris Township Planning Board meeting to order. The legal notice required in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act has been satisfied and a statement certifying same will be executed. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. On the roll call, Sonia?
Here.
Quilla,
Here.
Murphy. Here. Mr. Alonso.
Here.
Is in order. Here. The Flowers.
Here.
Mr. Watt,
Here.
Mr. Slade,
Here.
Mr. Warner,
Here.
Mr. Phillips,
Here.
Mr. Fishinger,
Here.
and I, Sonia Santiago here. Did I miss somebody?
Great, thank you. Welcome, everybody, to our first in-person planning board meeting in such a long time. Some of our board members hadn't even met each other in person, so it's nice to see everybody. We are presenting this meeting virtually for members of the public who want to observe. They will not be able to participate in the meeting. They will not be able to ask questions, but they can observe. And so we're glad that we're able to provide that service to the public. Board members, if they need to be virtual, can be so, and will be able to participate as though they're here in the room. With that being said, why don't we jump to other matters and handle the legal services first? Might as well get that out of the way. Usually I go to the attorney to read this.
I don't have the resolution handy, candidly.
So we have a resolution, as you know, Mr. Warner has changed firms. He continues to be representative for this board. So what this resolution does, it memorializes the fact that Mr. Warner, in his capacity as our attorney, is doing so now under a different firm. The contract is still going to have representation of Mr. Warner in a different firm.
And Mr. Chairman, that all the terms of the contract are the same, but for the name of the firm and the address, everything else is exactly the same. Fortunately, my name appears in the name of the new firm as it did in the prior firm, which is a good thing from my perspective.
Okay, thank you. We're happy about that as well.
Thank.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr.
I'd
Lessa.
like to make a motion. We move the resolution forward and adopt it.
I'll second that motion.
Second, Mr. Jorfi, on the roll call.
Yes. Okay. Mr. Quillen,
Yes.
Mr. Alonso,
Yes.
Ms. Murphy. Yes. Mr. Flowers,
Yes.
Ms. Van Order,
Yes.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
Mr. Benoit,
Yes.
so moved.
Thank you all for your continued faith and trust in me, and it's a privilege to continue to represent this board.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Warner. Next item on the agenda, Madison Avenue Urban Renewal. Sonia, you want to read this?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. This is 303-22 Madison Avenue Urban Renewal LLC for an amended site plan. Block 8409, lot 1, 315 Madison Avenue in the OSGU zone. This is a continuation from the May 16, 2022 public hearing. Applicant proposes to redesign the facade of the new buildings, increase the number of restaurant seats, and remove the water wall from the outdoor patio with other related improvements.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, I did have an opportunity to review the notice, the new notice for this matter, found the content to be sufficient Found it to be timely served, certified mail July 28, published July 26, both at least 10 days prior to this evening. So the board continues to have jurisdiction to continue to hear this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Warner. Applicant, Mr. Vitolo, you want to proceed?
Yes, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Good evening, Frank Vitola with Sills, Cummis and Gross. My name is not in the masthead. If it was, I'd probably be on a yacht. It's not. I'm here on behalf of the applicant RH. This is RH's application for amended site plan, as you just heard from Ms. Santiago. Those are the changes that we initially were seeking. We were here before this board in May of this year. During that hearing, you heard from our civil engineer, Matt Seckler. He walked the board through the changes to the fountain in the front of the site and how it impacts the turn radius around and over that element. He also testified that RH was removing a water feature from the site, and he also described some other minor site changes. You then heard from our project architect, John Burson, who's also here this evening. John showed the board the new design for the building facades, and he explained RH's rationale for those changes. John testified about a change in the number of restaurant seats from 120 to 148 combined restaurant and wine bar seats, which is still under the 164 combined restaurant and wine bar seats permitted. John also spoke about RH's revisions to the plan for the Abbey, including RH's decision to replace the existing leaded and stained glass windows with new windows and to utilize the Abbey's basement spaces for retail and business purposes rather than building mechanicals. Finally, we recalled Mr. Seckler, this time with his hat on as a professional planner, and he went through the planning proofs for the deviations that RH seeks in this case. Some board members voiced concerns about the new design, while others did not like RH's decision to remove the existing Abbey windows. Following quite a bit of internal discussions and in response to the board's concerns, RH has decided to keep the Abbey's leaded and stained glass windows in place. RH has also decided to change its plans to demolish a significant portion of the western wing of the Abbey, which was slated to be converted to a ruin feature. As Mr. Burson will explain, rather than demolish the walls and the roof of that wing, RH will keep the structure intact and utilize it for its retail and back of house operations. Also tonight, and as recommended by Mr. Phillips' office, you will see updated renderings of the facade that are more realistic than the images we showed you in May. As most of you know, the last year has not been kind to high-end furniture businesses, and RH has not been spared from that trend. Like all other businesses in that line, RH has been forced to re-examine its current business and its plans for growth. Fortunately, not only is RH here this evening to reaffirm its commitment to completing this project, it will make it a priority and would like to begin construction in earnest as soon as possible. We thank the board for granting RH a special meeting this evening, and we look forward to bringing this amazing project across the finish line. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I am prepared to call our first witness.
Please do.
Okay, Mr. John Burson. And Mr. Chair, Mr. Burson was sworn at the May meeting. I'm not sure, Mr. Warner, whether you'd want to re-swear him and
No,
re-qualify him, or are we good?
you're good. I'll just remind him he remains under oath as he knows, and he'll let us know, he can confirm his license remains in good standing.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I defer to the chair. Continue to accept, Mr.
Yes.
Chairman. No.
Okay, I want to thank the board for taking the time for this special hearing. It's a pleasure to see everybody in person. And we appreciate, as always, your attention to this important project. As Mr. Vitolo, and I'm also here with my colleague, Eric Foister. We are delighted that the stained glass and leaded glass windows will be preserved at the Abbey. I know Mr. Vitolo just spoke about that, and we are just very pleased with that decision. And in the event that there are any windows that cannot be saved, we'll work with the township on an appropriate solution. With regard to the change at the Abbey, the decision to retain the west wing that was informed in by the retail possibilities, a reevaluation of the project. As we've spoken before, there's been much discussion about the architecture and the style of the project, but there are other factors as well. And in the end, it was decided by RH that it was actually more prudent to retain that west wing as interior retail space. So while it was originally slated for demolition in the redevelopment plan, it was subsequently repurposed as the ruin where the interior would be demolished. And at this time, it is now going to be preserved intact as retail space on the first 2 floors and as back of house space in the basement. It should be noted that the basement of the west wing will accommodate back of house functions, and more valuable space that's under the central portion of the Abbey will be used for retail. Finally, also, there was an exterior fireplace that was part of the ruin. Now that the building is going to be, that wing is going to be retained as interior space, that fireplace is no longer a feature of the project. Finally, we had heard from the board over the past few months that the soft resolution of our 3D renderings did not accurately convey or represent the quality of the architecture. So we took a great deal of time to rework the renderings, increase the resolution, and we believe they look much sharper and more representative of the project. With that, I will then switch over to the PowerPoint.
If I may, Mr. Vitolo, is this is different from Exhibit A1 that was introduced back in May?
Correct.
Okay, and we can, with the chair's permission, continue to use that protocol and just mark this as Exhibit A2 in its entirety. Do we have an idea of how many pages or slides?
11 pages.
11, okay. A2 is, with your permission, Mr. Chairman, 11 slides. Compendium.
Okay.
With today's date.
That's different than this.
It's been culled from what you have.
It's being called for me. Okay, thank you.
Sure. Before we go further, can you just make sure everyone can hear properly who's virtual? I know George was virtual before we go further into the meeting.
That's a good idea. Thank you. George, you can hear us okay?
I can hear you. The only person I'm having trouble hearing is Sonia when she speaks, but everyone else I've been able to hear fine.
Okay, thank you. And then, do we know
I
whether,
show that Jeannie has come in as an attendee, but I am not able to promote her. I tried twice, I'll try again, but for some reason she's not moving over as a panelist.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, Jim, if she's
Might
not,
only be on the phone.
if she's not a panelist, we can't be sure that she can see and hear everything, correct? Or at least see everything.
Well, she should see.
Should see on-
all the
on
exhibits.
screen.
She should see everything.
Can she see the conference room, the municipal?
Hi, I'm in now.
Okay,
Oh, hi, Jeannie.
I can see it all along, but I guess you guys didn't know.
okay. No objection, Mr. Vitolo, to her participation? given that she can see and hear everything. Okay, thank you. We're good without objection, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Is there anyone,
Thank you.
is there anyone to know if the members of the public can hear?
Presumably,
Yes.
if George and Jeannie could hear us,
And
okay,
they can
then
hear
it
as
should be
well.
the same stream. Yeah, just
Okay.
want to make sure before we go further into tonight's hearing.
Thank you. Good idea. Okay. Want to proceed?
Great, thank you. And I think, as I mentioned, we worked very hard on the resolution of the renderings. Unfortunately, the ones projected on the screens are still very soft, but I sure hope the ones that are on your screens show the increased resolution. This is the bird's eye view of the project that we've shown you in the past. Here, though, you can begin to see that the materials are reading more clearly, as well as the fenestration. Here is a street view of the central access building. And you can see that the awning is better articulated in these renderings, the lighting, as well as the RH logo. And then a close-up of the modern gallery. You can see that the brick is articulated in these renderings. Again, the fenestration, the windows are all very clear, as is the glass and metal awning. And also importantly, the RH logo. You can see as well the beveled heads to the upper windows and some of the other features that we've spoken about in the past, including these kind of corner turrets. I think the articulation is better expressed in these renderings. Here in plan is the basement, showing inside the red rectangle the recaptured basement space at the west wing of the Abbey. And as mentioned before, it's back of house, it's clerical, shipping and receiving. Here we are on the first floor. Again, inside the red rectangle is what was formerly the ruin, now the first floor of the preserved west wing. Inside the red square is where the exterior fireplace was formerly located.
Sorry, Jeannie? Jeannie, can you please mute yourself? Okay, I'm sorry. May I
No
proceed?
problem. Okay. Okay, in this next slide, this is the second floor of the project. Again, inside the red rectangle is the second floor of the west wing of the Abbey, which is now interior retail gallery space. Here is a closer street level view of the central access building and the modern gallery. Again, just showing how the brickwork is better articulated in these renderings, the RH logo, the lighting flanking the entrance, as well as the metal and glass awning. Even the people inside the central access building are now visible. Similarly, the modern gallery is better articulated in these renderings. And we are very pleased with the way it highlights the architecture. And we do prefer these to the softer renderings that were previously presented. Here is a view from one of the furniture gardens, and it's looking south and east. To the left in this slide is the back of the, let's see if I can point. There we go. There we are. That's the back of the main part of the Abbey facing west. And then here's the west wing, albeit obscured by trees. And then following slide shows you the west wing preserved along with the windows. And we are actually very pleased with being able to preserve this piece of the project. It was not the most important architectural feature of the original Abbey, but it still carries with it a great deal of history And we're pleased that it is now is still part of the project. And then finally, just a view through the entrance on Center with the Abbey itself. And again, the higher resolution showing the detailing and stonework at the Abbey, and actually doing a better job highlighting the detailing of the entry piers into the project.
Okay, we don't have any other questions for this witness, so if there are questions from the board, certainly the board.
Yeah, Mr. Burson, when you say softer architecture, you softer view, I guess it was, were you referring to the architecture being softer or the picture
Oh,
itself?
the picture itself.
Just the picture itself?
Yes.
Okay, wonder if you can clarify, because when I first saw the changes, it looked like they were different than last time, but then I saw it was, I think it was dated March. So the center access building and the
Yeah.
gallery building, those facades, can you talk about those in a little more detail to see how they vary from the presentation you had last meeting, or are they the same?
They're the same. They are
Okay.
the same.
Okay, all right, I wanted to clarify that. Board members?
Thank you. I did have a question as I'm looking at the comparison rendering and a former one, as well as the sheet that references the roof plan. Can you just comment on the changes to the roof? It looks like there's more mechanicals or something that's up there on the Abbey roof, and there's a change to the window canopy, window top, I guess, if you will, of the middle building. Can you just comment on those for us?
Okay, so we do have more mechanical on the roof of the Abbey. We are accommodating the west wing. That's reclaimed interior space.
Is that visible from, that looks like it's visible from when you drive into the building? Is it protected in some way by a parapet or something?
Yes.
Okay.
So it will not be visible?
I think, let me just see here. Here. So you can see, for example, a little bit kind of poking up.
But it's not an overwhelming visual that you see, because
No.
at the view that I'm seeing in this rendering, it looks like it's a pretty.
Yeah, you would
Yeah.
only see that view in a helicopter. I mean, I don't know, but
I don't have a helicopter.
in a lot
Yeah.
of these projects, there's always a tendency to show it from up in the air, but no one really is ever going to be up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
Can you comment about the glass tops on the center building? Those are changed significantly as well.
Yes, the skylight, you can see this first one, the actual glass area has been reduced. So there's kind of an opaque perimeter around it. And likewise, there's similarly a slight opaque perimeter around the skylight over the restaurant.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but one assumes you still have light coming into that space, but you just don't have as much.
You will
expanse
have
window.
considerable light coming into those spaces.
Thank you.
Mr. Quillen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a question similar to Ms. Murphy's about the mechanicals on the roof of the Abbey. My memory may be faulty, but it seems like that enclosure is higher than in the prior plans. Is that true or is that not true?
Oh. Okay. Okay. We will confirm the height.
Seems high and it surrounds quite a bit of equipment. I guess you just testified that there's more equipment now
There's more-
because the
Yeah.
footprint of the Abbey is bigger now?
Yeah, so we do have more equipment up there. So we will confirm if and to what degree the height is increased.
And perhaps maybe the dimensions in their entirety, because I'm assuming the width and the height, the perimeter increased. I apologize for interrupting, Mr.
Yeah.
Board Member Quillen, but
No, thank you. No, that's good. Thank you. So can you tell me what the height of the barrier is and what the height of the parapet is?
I'm sorry, so the 2'6" is the violation. So we're going 8 feet, but 2'6" is obscuring. Okay, yeah, so the crenellated parapet is 2'6". Our equipment enclosure is 8 feet. So there is a net of 5'6" above the crenellated parapet. That is,
And I understand from the exhibit that we haven't gotten to yet about acoustical noise attenuation, that those barriers are important for noise attenuation. So I know there's a trade-off there. My other question is about the windows, the stained glass windows in the Abbey. If RH determines that a window is not going to work out, that it's difficult to repair, and they want to do something else, who will they contact?
they will speak with the board and the township.
We're happy to agree with whatever process the board would like us to. So if it's with the board engineer, we're happy to do that.
I guess we need to decide what we want. It doesn't seem like convening a full meeting of the planning board and having that a topic isn't necessarily the best choice, but maybe that's something the board should discuss. Okay, those were all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jeffrey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Did you have any considerations to doing, at least on the new wing on the rooftop, any sort of sustainability efforts or green roof structuring to reduce the, I guess, heat capture from the rooftop? I know a lot of new construction, especially LEED qualified or certified buildings, will have some sort of remediation on the rooftop. Were there any considerations on your end for the new buildings?
I think we can speak further with our engineers about specifics. There is no green roof per se, but a great deal of effort is put into certainly code required environmental efforts.
Mhm. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Any other board members?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to say I'm delighted that you're making an effort to preserve those historic windows. That was a major concern of mine the last time we met, and I applaud your efforts in that respect. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I'd like to echo that because it was very disappointing to hear that last time. I do imagine the Historic Preservation Committee would have to be involved. It's subjective to say, okay, well, RH is going to decide this window. How are they going to decide that? What the criteria for deciding that this window is not something we want to preserve, but this window is. So we're not experts. Some we're experts, I guess, the Historic Preservation Committee. Maybe they would know something.
We certainly contemplated their involvement. They've been involved the whole way through.
Right.
It's just up to the board on the extent of the involvement that you want.
Yeah.
That's all.
I guess we just ask on a window by window basis, you're going to need to decide whether or not this is something that you can preserve. And so we're wanting to, of course, to preserve as much as possible.
Understood.
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you. And the HVAC enclosure, could you maybe paint that the color of the exterior? Would that make it less visible? Is that something you can do?
Yes, we can.
Okay, all right, thank you. So make that a,
I'm sorry, I missed that. I was discussing that, the wording of the earlier condition, but.
this was the HVAC borders on top of the roof. If they were painted the same color as the facade brick, then
Or
Would
maybe-
would that stand out more though?
Wait, wait.
Right now it's
I don't
painted the
know.
same as the rooftop,
Yeah.
so it may blend in better that way.
And maybe we can do some test
Yeah.
ballots and see what kind of reduces the visibility.
because like you say, no one's going to see the rooftop itself. We're only going to see standing back, the color of the facade. So, I mean, that's fine.
I don't think we would have any objections to offering options to the township plan
Okay,
and having his office. Which is
that's great. I appreciate that. Okay,
Chairman, I think you want those crenellations to stand out from the background. So you probably want a lighter color.
no. So they'll look at that. All right, thank you. That's a good point, George. Any other questions for this witness? Any members of the public in the room? Questions for this witness? Seeing none. Oh, yes, sir.
Shall I speak from here?
We have a microphone here.
And if you'd be kind enough to give us your name and address, please, as well.
Sure. Thanks, everyone. I'm Jim Dingler, and I live at 47 Crescent Drive, just over to this side of the picture. So just two quick questions. So the west wing is going to be retained now. It's going to be a retail gallery. So it will, my question is, will it function the same as the galleries located elsewhere on the property? It's not buying doesn't take place here, but it's more of a showroom.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, sure. Thank you. The other point, this is a point, I could probably turn it into a question, but with the discussion about the mechanics on the roof, I just want to express my interest in the noise volume being modulated lower, as low as possible. And I assume that's what the walls are for. I know there's more equipment up there now, but aside from having a 60-car parking lot on the other side of this building close to me, now I'm hearing that there's going to be a lot of mechanical equipment up on top. So I would just hope if there are ways to soften the noise.
I believe we're going to have testimony on that.
The
Later
residents would
today.
appreciate that.
Right? There has been a report on that, so that'll be
Yeah,
coming.
we submitted a revised acoustics report, but it was only submitted for this additional area on top. Jim, if you want to review that and have questions for us, we're happy to sit down with you. We spent a lot of time and we're spending a significant amount of money to make sure that we do not violate or that we're well below.
And the applicant stipulated to compliance with NJAC 7:29, which is the state regulations, which are incorporated within our ordinance for sound attenuation, both daytime and nighttime. And will there be a post-construction test to confirm compliance? Stipulated to by the applicant, should the board so desire. I don't want to get too far ahead. I don't know if the board would desire, but should the board so desire. Would the applicant stipulate to a post occupancy test of to ensure that the noise does not exceed the statutory, or I should say, the regulatory levels.
That's good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Warner.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other members of the public? Seeing none, I apologize. I missed our professionals. Mr. Slade, do you have any questions? for this
No
witness?
questions.
Mr. Warner?
None. Thank you.
Mr. Phillips?
I have one question. Back to the discussion about whether you can see the mechanical screen sort of anywhere on the ground. The other factor that comes into play is how far that screen is set back from the edge of the roof. I'm just wondering if you can tell us, particularly from the front and let's say the left-hand side. It's difficult to see in that rendering, but it looks like it's set back.
Just make sure you do it in the mic.
Just in the microphone. And state your name, please.
Okay, that's fine. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to God or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, and your name and address, business address is fine for the record.
My name's Eric Foister, and
Okay,
my name's
you
Eric.
spell your
Foister.
last name, Eric.
F as in Frank, EUSTER. And I'm a resident of New Jersey, so I live at 5 Allen Place, Fair Lawn, New Jersey.
And Eric, were you involved in designing the architectural plans for this project?
Yes, I was.
And you're familiar with the recent submission that we made in this matter?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
And so, Mr. Phillips, to answer your question, the mechanical equipment has grown, right, to condition the new west wing of the Abbey, but it's pushed back as far as possible from the facade. And the height of the mechanical screen is a function of being taller than the equipment, because that purpose of that is, number one, for sound dampening for the surrounding neighbors. And so it actually has to be taller than the equipment. But you can rest assured that it's pushed back, and we made every effort to make it as least visible, both from the grounds and then as far as possible. But another thing to consider is that there's lots of landscaping, and we're saving a lot of the older, taller trees. And so the farther you get away, the more obscure your view will be of the roof and anything much higher than eye level. And so I think we can rest assured that it's our best effort.
Do you know, or can you just look at the roof plan and indicate the distance from the front facade and particularly the left-hand facade that basically would be closest to the adjoining residence?
Yes,
If you have a roof plan, it should be beyond that.
I think, unfortunately, I think that was one of the slides that was culled from what we submitted and what we're presenting now.
We come back, Eric, with the numbers?
Yeah. And it should be with.
Good old paper.
It's close.
Okay, so in general, it's set back close to just over 15 feet from the east facade, which is the Madison Avenue facade.
And the side facade?
That's a little less. If I had to estimate, it would, here on the stand, it looks closer to 12 feet.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Thank you. Any follow-up questions from board members? Seeing none. Mr. Vitale, you want to go to your next witness?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'd like to call Matt Seckler, please.
Mr. Sackler was sworn at the last hearing back in May. He no doubt understands he remains under oath, and I suspect his license remains in good standing, but he can confirm same.
That is correct, yes.
Okay, and is he appearing now, Mr. Vitolo, as, or Mr. Sackler, as engineer, planner, or both?
He's here as a planner. He was qualified during the May hearing as a professional planner. If he does veer off into engineering testimony, he'll let me know, and then I can let the board know that he's no longer has his planning hat on. So, it's like being at a Brazilian restaurant. You should have had the green and the red block.
That's an-
I guess no one eats as much.
Radizio? Is that it?
Radizio.
Radizio.
Radizio?
Sorry, Mr. Sackler, could you just move the laptop so the people, the participants at home can see you? Thank you. There you go.
Oh,
That's
so I
better.
can see. Okay, I got you. Sure.
Thank you.
Mr. Sackler, you're here tonight to address the deviations from the redevelopment plan. Is that correct?
Yes, as part of the changes you heard tonight, there are 3 new deviations. All of them essentially because of what you specifically heard about maintaining the wing, the southern wing of the building, specifically the historic aspect of that wing. That wing looks like it was constructed in various parts, but because it was not originally anticipated to keep a portion of that wing, there are a couple of deviations that we're seeking because the plan was not written with that in anticipation. One was related to just purely the demolition. The plan, the redevelopment plan specifically calls for the demolition of a portion of that wing to create the ruins. That was the design intent at the time. Obviously maintaining it, that would be a deviation because it explicitly says to remove. However, when looking at really the purposes of the redevelopment plan and really the overall goals of the project, it spoke to the historic preservation of the site, that, they want to preserve the historic structure, the grounds. It's important to the history of Morris Township. And the idea of being able to reuse was always seen as the optimal solution for this building. So obviously we see this as a benefit. It actually allows us to reuse more of the building that was initially anticipated. So again, we believe that it's clearly showing a positive criteria of historic preservation. We also believe that, and I know there was a resident nearby that came out tonight, but obviously having more showroom inside actually may be better than having kind of a indoor outdoor area in terms of impacts to noise or anything like that. So we do think that this is clearly satisfying positive criteria. We don't believe there's any significant negative impacts. In fact, again, we believe that being able to provide still the same functional circulation, there's no changes to the parking aisles, no changes to parking, no changes to really any of the site plan itself, other than the structure being maintained. We don't believe that there's any negative criteria or negative conditions being created due to the maintenance of this wing of the building. Second deviation is related to the amount of basement space. The amount of basement space was limited to a total of 14,000 square feet. However, we are exceeding that because this wing has a basement itself. So again, it was not anticipated to have this wing. It was not anticipated to have this basement remain. However, we believe that it's, will be efficient to reutilize the basement space under this wing, which puts us at a total of 15,764 square feet of basement space, where 14,000 is permitted. Again, we believe this is a small increase in basement space. It doesn't reflect an over-intensification of the site. In fact, the project still complies with the maximum number of indoor square feet exclusive of basement space. So again, we don't see any negative impacts by maintaining it. And again, it is under the existing structure. To remove the basement really would be more difficult in order to keep the wing itself in operation. So we believe, again, it kind of goes hand in hand with the maintaining a historic structure and adaptively reusing the structure, which is a positive criteria. Lastly is related to the fireplace. Specifically in the plan, it spoke to 2 fireplaces are required. One of the fireplaces was going to be in the location of this ruin. Obviously, removing the ruin area and closing it eliminates the ability to have another outdoor fireplace. So we will still have 1 outdoor fireplace. but the second would be removed. Again, we've spoken to, again, maintain the structure we think is above all else a positive because of the maintenance of the historic building, keeping the site to look as much as possible in the existing condition while being able to utilize it for this new and exciting use. And again, we don't see this being a significant negative impact. Again, in fact, it probably reduces the amount of noise or outside kind of activity on the site itself. So overall, again, I spoke previously at our earlier hearings about the purposes of the MLUL in terms that are advanced overall by the project. They still would be the same purposes: A, health, safety, welfare; I, visual environment; J, conservation or preservation of historic sites or places; and M, being able to provide coordination with public-private entities. Again, this being a redevelopment plan with the sole purpose of keeping this kind of jewel of the township inactive, and obviously changing the use of it, but be able to maintain the building, a significant amount of the building. So overall, I believe that these 3 additional deviations can be granted without any significant impacts to the public or the plan itself.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. We don't have any questions for Mr. Secretary.
Board members, any questions for Mr. Secretary? Mr. Slate, any questions?
No, no questions.
Mr. Warner?
Just a couple of quick ones, if I may. Mr. Seckler, these 3 deviations are in addition to the previously requested 3 deviations, the facade changes, the modern wing second floor, including required vertical changes in plane, and the reallocation of number of seats. Is that correct?
I think also the water wall was another deviation, but yes.
Okay. Water wall, and it was originally,
Included and then removed.
well, was it removed or was it basically the vertical nature of it removed?
Yeah.
That was the fountain.
That was the fountain.
Yeah, the
Thank you.
water wall was in the back.
Water wall removed. Okay, thank you. So we have 7 deviations from the previously approved plan, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you testified at the last hearing as to the other 4, correct?
That is correct, yes.
I should say the first 4. Okay. And that was all consistent with the redevelopment plan standards for deviations, which are, if I recall correctly, somewhat akin to the C1 or C2 standards.
Correct. They would fall under similar to the C1 and C2 standards.
Okay. And in your opinion, the conditions stipulated to by the applicant, I suspect, as well as the continuation of any conditions of the prior approval that are not inconsistent with this approval, should it be approved, those would have a reasonable relation or nexus to potential detriments that could be mitigated by those conditions and therefore are reasonable conditions?
Yes, those are reasonable conditions.
I don't think I have anything further. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr.
I
Phillips?
do. So Matt, the redevelopment plan has a cap on the amount of space in the existing abbey that can be used for retail gallery shows, such as 14,000. And does the retention of the wing trip that at all, or are you within that?
We are slightly above that with it. That's the 15,764 square feet, where 14,000 would be permitted on the first and second floors. Again, related to the fact that we're now indoor space that used to be outdoor space at the ruin.
But the figure you gave before, the 15,764, I thought that was just total
Look,
basement space.
I apologize. That was not the basement space number. That is the retail gallery space on the first or second floors, and that's related to the maintenance of the of the conversion of something from a ruin to in structure.
So it does trip that.
It does trip that, yes. That is, and I don't, I think I misspoke. Basement space, I don't believe we,
That's what.
yeah,
that's what
basement
the
space, we're still
structure-
good. Yeah, I
But you
flipped
do-
it.
You do
yes.
trip the 14,000.
Yes, but not the maximum total, which was 44,000
Correct.
square feet of indoor space.
So to the extent that someone would say that's a deviation because that's filled out. Can
Yes.
you just
Yeah, and
put something on the record to support that?
yeah, same relation. The fact that we took space that was going to be utilized for retail purposes outside in a ruin, keeping it in now a structure that's being maintained. We tripped the number of square feet that's allowable or showroom space on the first and second floors.
And then the other question I had was the addition of the retail space related to the retention of the wing. Does that change the parking requirement? And I'm assuming it went up a bit, but you're still within the required parking in the redevelopment.
Correct. The required parking will be 166 spaces. We have 175, including off-site. It also requires us to have 111 on-site spaces. We have 115. So we are still compliant. The number did tick up, but it doesn't create a deviation or we're compliant.
And I just, one other thing, and this is probably to you, Frank, but when you gave your introduction, I just want to be clear that the current plans do not propose a wine bar.
Correct.
There's not a seated wine.
Right. There's no.
Correct. I just want to be
It's
clear
just
on
a
that.
counter.
I'm not sure what that is, but I know that part of your argument with the increased restaurant seating was that you were giving up the ability to do the 44-seat wine
Right,
bar. I
right.
just want to be clear that.
I'm not going to get testimony on this, but let me call up. Let me get testimony on the record.
Okay. thank you.
Okay, so I'll open the presentation and we could look at the plan together. Okay, so as you enter the central access building, you pass through a gallery, a grand hall, and another retail gallery. This is what we're considering a wine counter. It's 4 sets of countertops that have wine on display and they're accessed by the staff. So the patron of the restaurant will walk and pass through this area, but there is no seating and this will serve people in the restaurant.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yes.
Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any board member follow-up to those? Mr. Lessa?
Chairman, Mr. Phillips mentioned 2 items. Do those trigger a variance? Redevelopment plan that had a specific square footage and now we're going over that square footage. Is that a variance?
The short answer is, Joe, it's a technical deviation from the way the redevelopment plan says you can divide up the 44,000 square feet, which is why I asked Mr. Seckler to put some testimony on the record in support of exceeding the amount of floor area that is specifically set forth in the redevelopment plan for the Abbey itself. And because they're now retaining the wing that was originally envisioned to be demolished, that trips that deviation. But he's basically put testimony on the record in support of that variance.
And he confirmed that the entire 44,000 square feet of floor area approximately is still not exceeded.
Correct.
I'm just specifically thinking about the future of somebody in a time period making complaints. So I just want to make sure that it's a variance and notice.
Yeah, what they're basically doing, Joe, is they're asking to reallocate to some extent what they're allowed to do within that 44,000 square foot total envelope. And they're giving a little bit more because they're retaining that wing, which was originally demolished. And the other, my follow-up question is just to make sure they didn't trip a parking variance. And you heard the answer that does.
Do you agree?
I do agree.
Okay, thank you. Any members of the public have a question for this witness? Yes. Please come up and state your name.
My name is Ben Yu from 75 Canfield Road, just the right up corner about the building.
I apologize, but I did not get your name. If you can please repeat your name and spell your name, please.
First name Fan, F-A-N, last name Y-U,
Okay, and your address?
75 Canfield Road.
Thank you. Please proceed with your question.
I disagree about increase seats from 120 to 148. I think maybe this time we agree with this, and next time maybe 100 and they will propose 164. Sorry, a little nervous. Yeah, I think 148 had too much for the whole building and the restaurant. They must be very noisy. Now, when I work at home, I can hear workers work in the property. So no matter the distance, 12 feet or 14 feet, we can hear this. So that is it may make very noise and affect all the neighborhood. So I think 120 seats is enough. It's limit. I don't want to increase any. Yeah, that's my opinion. Thank you.
Before you leave, Mr. Chairman, if I may swear in, Ms. Yu. Since
was a
it was more
comment.
in the way of comment than testimony. Do you mind if I swear you in so that you are swearing to the truth of what you just said? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, if you'll raise your right hand, please. Do you swear to God or affirm that the testimony you have already given and any more that you may give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I swear.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, because, as soon as I grab the mic, I tend to hold on to it. I did find the notice to reconfirm my recollection that all of these deviations that were addressed by the applicant and their planner this evening were in fact specifically noticed in the most recent notice, including the building yield and outdoor dining space / indoor space, specifically with the 15,764 square feet of existing Abbey, exclusive of the basement being repurposed for retail gallery or showroom, whereas a total of 14,000 square feet of such space on the first and second floor was permitted. So just to confirm that everything is covered there. Excellent question by Vice Chairman Alesso.
Okay, thank you. How can we address this resident's comment? Mr. Secretary?
I guess the plan permitted 164 seats, which was divided up in between the restaurant seats and the wine bar seats. This was previously my testimony the last hearing. Similar to what we had just discussed about the building square footage, we're just allocating the seats away from a wine bar and to the restaurant. So the restaurant is now at 148 seats, which is still less than the number of seats that were permitted under the redevelopment plan. They're just being solely allocated to a restaurant and not the wine bar. In terms of questions or comments about noise, again, it is less seats than what was initially anticipated, which was again 164 total. So in terms of the amount of customers that can be on the site in the seats, we're actually reducing that to 148 seats for the restaurant. And again, you've heard, I'm not the acoustical engineer. There was obviously extensive testimony about the acoustics of the site and reports provided accordingly.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Murphy?
In the acoustical study, page 6 of 38, there is a reference to a noise attenuation property line barrier that might help address
Mr. Why don't we could call our staff expert easier.
It'd be great.
Yeah.
I think that would help answer because we had two people asking questions about
Yeah.
noise.
I don't think so. Okay. If you'll raise your right hand, please. Do you swear to God or affirm testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Name and address, business address, fine for the record.
Frank Reeder, also a resident of New Jersey, 111 Whittle Avenue, that's in Bloomfield.
Give the board the benefit of your education and experience.
Sure. I'm a graduate of University of Hartford, where I received a degree in acoustical engineering and music. That's a Bachelor of Engineering degree. I've practiced acoustical engineering professionally for 12 years, including probably several dozens of projects involving environmental noise, community noise, control of rooftop noise equipment, design of barriers.
And testified before any court?
I have not.
Mr. Chair, we'd like to follow up on Mr. Reader, the next expert. So,
No objection.
Mr. Reader, you heard the questions that we just asked. And let's start with the first. There was a person from the public who had some concerns about noise in the interior of the building from additional restaurant seats. Do you have anything on that?
Sure, I can speak to that. There's a number of considerations that have been included in the project for control of noise egressing off the property, both in terms of noise occurring at ground level and on the roof in terms of mechanical equipment. We'll speak about ground level first. There is a barrier that's continuous around the entire property. I guess that's south and west edges of the property that border all the residential lots anyway. The barrier is made of heavyweight acrylic material, which is continuous to the maximum height allowable under the zoning ordinances, to my understanding. It's minimum 5 pounds per square foot, which is what requires it to be acoustically effective in terms of blocking noise. It's continuous along its length, and it has no gaps, and it therefore provides around 10 to 12 decibels of attenuation from noise occurring within the property as perceived in the residences. Decibels are a very subjective thing. 10 decibels could be described as a halving of the amount of noise that you would experience without the barrier, which is significant in the world of acoustics. To evaluate its effectiveness, we performed a range of mock-up activities on the site, including car door slams, playing of music in cars, cars starting, backing in and out, that sort of thing. And you can see in the report calculated the effect of those noise levels on the adjacent properties. They're all found to fall below, well below the limits of NJAC 729, the applicable noise code ordinance, which has been previously referenced. And more so, they've fallen within the band of ambient noise levels which occur on the site, which we also measured while we were there.
We're going to talk about the rooftop.
Certainly, yeah, the rooftop equipment has a similar barrier, different material. We considered the sound pressure levels of all the mechanical equipment in the current design, all the HVAC equipment, which is provided and tested by the manufacturers of the various pieces of equipment. Utilizing standard acoustic equations, we calculated the propagation of sound to the various residences and evaluated the levels relative to code requirements and ambient, and therefore recommended the barriers that have been previously discussed and have been implemented into the project as recommended. And as with the perimeter property line, all the resultant sound levels fall well below both the daytime and nighttime sound level limits of NJAC and within the ambient range currently experienced on site.
Mr. Reader, one of the comments that our resident made had to do with the noise she hears now during construction versus what she's afraid she might hear once the project is completed. Could you address the differences that might be heard once the construction is over and the project is already underway?
Sure. I mean, speaking generally, of course, I've not been on site during construction to measure those noise levels, but construction is a very noisy thing. You know, hammers are used, anvils, you know, powerful equipment that is not used during a normal dining activity. The types of activities that occur while people are eating are, of course, much quieter than construction. I'll further say that NJAC includes a specific exemption for human voice. It's not subject to the noise level limits prescribed in NJAC. However, that said, the presence of the barrier around the perimeter does still provide a significant amount of benefit for noise from human voice and other activities that occur during dining.
Okay, thank you. Any board members? Mr.
I have a
Lasso?
question for Mr. Warner first. Mr. Warner, if we were to, I don't know, hypothetically talk about this barrier getting higher, would we have it within our jurisdiction to be able to allow the barrier to go to 8 feet?
Would we have it? I may answer the question by asking a question of Mr. Phillips. Do we have anything in the plan with respect to walls not being taller than 6 feet in the front or side? Or usually it's front yard. While I'm asking,
I believe we have some limits on the fences and the walls in the redevelopment plan, but I'll check.
Can I just address that? We worked for probably 2 years with the neighbors on this. In meetings, we sent drafts of the plan, attenuating walls, and the plantings on either side. I mean, it was probably the most negotiated and hardest work we did was on those walls, and they're built.
They're up.
They're already up. So I don't know if that's my opinion at all, but it really was something that.
I'm hearing 2 homeowners come before the board and make comments, so I'm asking a question. I accept the fact that we built them already.
Yeah, one of the homeowners was, Mr. Dangler was actually one of the ones we worked with in coming up with the wall. So.
Thank you.
Okay, any other board members?
Mr. Quillen has,
Mr. Quillen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to ask a question about how the measurement is done to the neighboring properties. How do you do that measurement to determine what the attenuation is across the barrier into a neighboring property?
To be clear, it's a calculation that we do. Of course, the barrier and the equipment don't exist today, so there's no measurement that can be done. But there are international standards that lay out the calculation procedure that is used to calculate the performance of a barrier. It involves the geometric relationship between the height of the barrier, the distance between the sources, and as I mentioned before, the actual material composition of the barrier.
Is it intended to measure the effect of the barrier on the property, the neighbor property at ground level or at some other level?
You can determine the level at any location you choose. We made our calculations based on, I believe, 5 feet above the ground, which is where most people's ears fall.
Okay, so if the neighbor who testified from 75 Canfield Road is working in a second floor room, she might not experience the benefit that you were modeling because the sound can travel across the top of the barrier and toward her windows.
That's true. As I mentioned before, the barrier was designed to be the maximum height. I understand, I'm not the architect, but I understand that was permitted under the requirements of this land use agreement.
But the restaurant is entirely indoors, isn't that correct? I know you're not necessarily the right witness for that question, but there is no outdoor seating. I know that. I don't believe there are windows that are going to be open. So aren't the diners always going to be completely indoors?
Of course, and so there'll be the sound levels emanating from indoors will be drastically without, doing a calculation. I can confidently say they'd be at least 25 decibels lower than they would be if the noise was generated outside. A standard window offers around 30 decibels additional of attenuation. So that's a halving, a halving, a halving, and a halving of the noise level. It's an extreme reduction.
And there's no contemplation of having live music inside the restaurant, for example?
Not to my knowledge.
Does anyone want to provide testimony on that subject? It doesn't seem like the right type of restaurant for that, but would anybody put a rock band inside the restaurant?
I wouldn't.
I mean, that's what would cause noise that would penetrate into a neighbor's yard from inside.
Yeah,
I
it
know
would,
because I know because I live near the Madison Hotel, which has a venue that sometimes has loud music.
the conservatory, right? Yeah, I mean, the facade would still be just as effective for live music than it is for, as it is for any other source that occurs within the restaurant. Of course, live music is just louder, so there's more noise to go through in the first place. But windows would still be just as effective for anything that occurs in the restaurant.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Groveland. Mr.
Sorry,
Russell?
I just wonder if I can get that question answered.
Yeah.
Would we be allowed to go past 6 feet if is that within our jurisdiction to grant a variance?
The redevelopment plan indicates that fences and walls must be no higher than 4 feet along Madison and 6 feet along, I guess, it's the side yards. That's what the redevelopment plan said.
So would we be allowed to grant a deviation?
You're always allowed to grant a deviation.
That's the answer to the question. So just a follow-up question now. Mr. Vitolo, is it, sir?
Yes.
You said the barrier is already built?
Yes.
And the sound expert, in your report, I thought you said that they weren't built. You couldn't go out there and actually do the measurement.
The rooftop areas I was referring to at that time.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Phillips, is there anything else you want to report on that?
No.
Okay, so at this point, we'll open up for comments. Any comments from the public? Any members of the public have any comments they'd like to make on this application in total?
And we,
Yes, sir.
we did get Ms. Yu's comment, obviously. So-
Yes, thank you.
Thanks again.
Actually, I will have to swear you now, Mr. Miller.
Okay.
Don't think I did yet. Do you swear to God or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you very much. And once again, name and address for the record.
Jim Dingler, Dingler, 47 Crescent Drive.
Thank you.
So just a couple of comments. I've heard a little testimony from my fellow resident about sort of the overall density of the utilization of the property. And I'll just mention that we are very sensitive to that. We think that the density of this property is very high. And I do flinch a little bit at the thought of increasing the restaurant seating by 20%. I feel that's material. But, I think there was some information offsetting with regard to what kind of noise that might produce. But we have to think about the parking and the traffic as well. And so I continue to be concerned about that. I understand we are where we are in terms of sort of the approval process, but we don't want the density of this property to be increased over where it is now in any way. We actually think the density of this property and the plan is too high, and it's going to cause a reduction in lifestyle and benefits and the residential nature for the neighbors. So I'm just going to go on the record with that. Secondly, I just want to say that, we have had conversations, as Mr. Vitolo had mentioned to us, regarding the bordering sound barriers. And those are up. That was built at the end of last year. I just want to say that our communication lines, as they had stood at the end of the year, have gone completely quiet. And it's been a little source of stress for some of the residents that we haven't been getting outbound communication regarding the state of the project and sort of what the ongoing plans are. They haven't been doing much over the last 2.5 months. And the residents want this project to move forward because the longer it stays in an uncompleted fashion, the more disruption there is for us. And then lastly, I would say that, we do need frequent communication. And I hope to establish that. Made a couple of efforts here tonight. But we just, our communication lines have gone cold and we're a little uncomfortable about that. So that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dingler. Mr. Vitolo?
Yeah, just briefly. One of the reasons why we agreed to do the post-occupancy studies, particularly as it relates to traffic, was to squarely address Mr. Dingler's concerns. So we are going to do at intervals studies after the project's done and once the CO is granted to determine whether or not the on-site, off-site parking is operating as it should be. And we also have an obligation, if it's not, to fix it. And as you heard tonight, we'll also be doing testing on the sound. And so we're going to make a concerted effort to make sure that representations made during this process prove out. And if they don't, we're going to be responsible for them and fix them. With respect to the communications, I appreciate the comment, Mr. Dank. Nothing's really happened in the last 6 to 8 months because we're going through this process of amended site plan. And I did introduce Mr. Dingler to Michael Avalone. He's here this evening. Michael, say hello to everybody. Michael came out from California. He is with RH. There's been some change in the RH leadership and in real estate, and Mr. Avalone is one of the leads on the project now. He's here. Please ask him for his cell phone or whatever. He's available to answer any questions. And I know, Jim, you have my information as well. So feel free to reach out to me whenever you need. So that's it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for making those efforts. They're very important, and we'll be looking out for the results of those tests and hearing from the neighbors to see how things are going. And obviously, we're very concerned with that as well.
Thank you,
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Lesso?
We've had some time since we've talked this, but just reading the sound report triggered 2 or 3 questions. So I could just ask the operational. I don't know if that's you, Mr. Michael.
Let me hear your question.
Yeah,
and I'll
sure.
get the
Thank
right
you.
person.
Yeah. So I'm reading that the restaurant's last seen is at 9 o'clock at night. I'm sure that's Monday through Sunday.
You're good.
Yes.
And what time is the hard close at night? Like, at what time could a resident expect to not hear noise from an operation or not expect to see traffic from the site?
Yeah. I hesitate a little bit because this is all on the record at some prior hearing, and I don't want to contradict what we've already said. But I don't know if Matt, do you have access to that information? I mean, we're digging back a little bit here, so let me see.
I'm sure whatever you tell us tonight was what you told us before, so.
You're
I assume you'd give
giving
us the
us
same answer, no?
Well, it depends how good your memory is. We were here only on these couple things, so, but we'll try and get you an answer. What other? Let me write down the question. So one was on when's the hard close? What
Yeah,
else?
no, I'm sensing, the concern for some of the residents about operations at night. And it's probably when people are most concerned about having their lives disrupted. So feeling comfortable that you're closed at 11 and nothing's happening would make me feel better than if it was 2.
I will tell you this, Mr. Lesso, all of the, because of these questions, of course, came up during the redevelopment plan process even. So the redevelopment plan lays out all of the, I'll call them the nuts and bolts on operations. we will comply with everything in this redevelopment plan. So whatever hours are set forth in there, that's what we're going to comply with. And I know we did get into that granular detail as we went through the redevelopment plan. So I could certainly pull it out and read those through. I mean, are all your questions have to do with
The last
hours?
one was with regard to, I understand there's no outside dining,
Correct.
but I got the sense that the concept was there'd be outside walking around with a glass of wine as you're.
Okay, so I can address that.
galleries.
Yeah, so currently in New Jersey, there is no special license for roaming with alcohol. I'm not saying we wouldn't try and change that, which I think we're going to, but for now, you can't roam around with a glass of wine.
So people wouldn't be getting a glass of wine from the wine bar, going outside in one of the outside galleries and sitting down and having.
Correct. They would be going from the wine area into the restaurant.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Mr. Russo. I guess we're at the point where you're done with all your testimony for this evening?
Yeah, I don't really need a formal summation. I just, again, want to thank the board for your time and efforts and your patience, frankly. I mean, we've been sort of weaving a little bit the last year, but given, what's going on in the world, it can be expected. But again, we're here, we're ready to go, and we're excited about being in Morris Township with this new project.
Okay,
So thank you very much.
Board members, any comments, deliberations?
I have a comment, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Russo?
I agree with Mr. Dingley. I still think this site is way too dense for this area. I think there's going to be a parking issue. I felt it that way before. I still feel that way now. I mean, I applaud the plan. I think it's absolutely beautiful. I commend the township for putting together the redevelopment plan. I just think this is just too big for the area. I just gave me the opportunity to open my mouth, so.
You always have the opportunity. We're kind of looking at the changes taking place. The basic site plan's already been approved.
But you get another bite at the apple.
I'm very pleased about the windows. I can live with the facade. I think that we need to get this project going as well. I'm very concerned about the resident concerns, and the applicant has noted that it will continue to look at the work that's being done and adjust things as necessary for the neighborhood. But, I don't find anything offensive about the changes. And if it were not for the windows, I would have concerns, but I feel much better about the project because of the window situation. Any other board members want to comment?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Crowan.
I think this is a good plan. I applaud the changes that have been made. I think that not having a ruin, but instead allowing the what I think of as the back wing of the original building retained is a good change, even though it does mean potentially more customers could fit into the building. I don't think that's going to be a significant difference. So I think that's good. And as far as the windows go, I do think we need to craft a stipulation that we like and that the applicant can live with and can understand and work with. So something on the order of 75% of the original stained glass windows will be retained, or 80%, and any that in the opinion of the applicant cannot be salvaged will be discussed with the Historic Preservation Commission. And if the applicant wishes to remove more than, say, 20% or 25% of the windows, then they have to come back to us. Something like that. Something more elegantly stated than what I just said, but that's the basics of what I think might work.
Mr. Chairman, I'd rather do it the other way and say 100% with some exceptions. The exceptions will be adjudicated by Mr. Slate and perhaps with input from the Historic Commission. So, make the assumption that we're going to preserve those windows And if there are particular exceptions, rather than saying keep 80%, let's say keep 100% and we'll deal with exceptions.
Mr. Quillen, you okay with that?
But then in no case would they have to come back to us. It would all be handled by the township engineer and perhaps the Historic Preservation Commission. Is that what you have in mind, Ms. Murphy?
It is, yes.
I think I'm okay with that, yes.
Okay.
We can agree to that.
Okay, so stipulated.
Any other board members want to weigh in?
I'll say a few words.
Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Having been a part of this since the original redevelopment plan and someone who grew up in this town, I would have to say I understand Mr. Alessa's concerns. I personally, when I see new development, I get uncomfortable having grown up here, and my family having experienced on the raw end of a bad redevelopment project many years ago. But I have to say, over the past few years with RH partnering with them, I appreciate all the work that you've done with the community, having meetings with the neighbors and bringing them onto the property and working with them. I know Kathy Wilson, our deputy mayor, did a lot of work on that a few years ago. And honestly, the amount of resources RH has put into this project, once putting the wall in and the buffers in before doing the construction on the building itself, went a long way in our minds. And I think it's going to be very hard to find a developer anywhere in the state that's willing to put the amount of resources RH is doing right now to try to make this tie into our community as best as possible and have as limited of an impact on our residents as possible. So I just want to thank the RH team. I appreciate all the comments from the board too, especially dealing with the windows and the historic nature of the building. And I think while I would tend to agree this is too large of a project for this footprint, preserving this abbey, I don't think would be feasible without a partner like RH right now. So I'd commend them for all the work they've been doing. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other board members wanna make a comment? If not, Mr. Warner, could you go over the changes or
Sure.
the approvals that we'd be looking for?
Certainly, what I understand the applicant to be requesting, and I'm sure applicant's counsel will correct me if I'm wrong, amended preliminary and final site plan approval with at least 6, possibly 7 deviations. Those deviations being the building design, redesign previously approved facade to, among other things, better harmonize the design of the new building with the Abbey. 2, outdoor patio furnishings, removal of the water wall from the outdoor patio area where a water wall feature along Canfield Road frontage was required, or I should say is required. Another outdoor patio furnishings is number 3. Changes to remove the southerly fireplace, the northerly fireplace to remain where 2 fireplaces are required. That southerly fireplace being the one in the previous ruin, which is no longer a ruin, but an actual retention of the wing of the Abbey. Building yield and outdoor dining space, 148 restaurant seats proposed, where 120 are permitted, but 164 combined are permitted. Bear with me. Right, that's correct. The demolition not occurring, i.e. the ruin not occurring, but remaining the southern wing of the Abbey. So whereas previously it was required to be demolished under the redevelopment plan, that's the 5th. And the 6th is what's referred to as building yield and outdoor dining space / indoor space, permitting the 15,764 square feet of the existing Abbey, exclusive of the basement space, to be repurposed for retail gallery or showroom space, whereas a total of 14,000 square feet of retail gallery or showroom space is permitted across the 1st and 2nd floors. That was that reallocation remaining under the 44,000 square foot retail total, or floor area total. So those are the 6 deviations, all noticed. And if it is a motion to grant the amended preliminary and final site plan approval and those 6 deviations, I'll assume it to be with all the stipulated 2 conditions, including all the conditions set forth in the prior resolution of approval, to the extent none of those are rendered inconsistent with the potential new approval, as well as the following conditions. The windows will be, stained glass windows in the Abbey will be preserved, and any that are determined by the applicant to be unable to be preserved, that determination will be in consultation with the township engineer and the Historic Preservation Commission, who will weigh in and participate in that determination. And ultimately, if indeed it is determined that they are not to be preserved, then the Township Engineer and Historic Preservation Commission will weigh in and agree with the applicant as to how to otherwise salvage or where or dispose of those windows. And I also intend to word it in a more loquacious fashion once I have an opportunity to do so. I apologize, there were borders, Mr. Chairman and Paul, and I didn't get it. There were options for the township planner.
The HVAC board?
That's okay, HVAC
It was
borders.
I think it had to do with the color of the rooftop.
Screening, right.
Screening.
Okay. Okay, that would be subject to the review and approval of our township professional planner, Mr. Phillips. Post occupancy testing and confirmation of compliance with NJAC 7:39 with respect to decibel level, sound level, maximums permitted daytime and evening pursuant to the state regulations. And bear with me. I don't think I have any other additional conditions for this particular potential approval.
It was post-occupancy testing of the parking as well, but that was in a previous session.
In the, exactly, that's one of the carry forward from the prior approval, absolutely.
Mr. Slade, do you have any others?
No, we covered everything that I had.
Okay, Mr. Vitolo?
No,
Okay, Mr. Phillips?
I think that he has everything, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so at this point, I'll entertain a resolution, the motion to approve this deviation, subject to all the conditions that Mr. Warner just.
I move for approval with the now, what is it, 9 deviations.
Thank you, Ms. Moore.
And thank you very much for listening to us last time.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Geoffrey, second on the roll call?
Mr. Quillen,
Yes.
Ms. McKay,
Yes.
Mr. Geoffrey,
Yes.
Mr. Alessa,
No.
Ms. Murphy,
Yes.
Mr. Flowers,
Yes.
Ms. Van Order,
Yes.
Mr. Benoit.
Yes.
So moved.
Congratulations. Thank you for your work, all the changes you made. Do we have anything else?
No, I think we
did
did.
the resolution.
Huh?
We'll see.
Was there anything?
No closed session, Mr. Chairman.
No closed session. I don't have my agenda here.
Here you go.
What do you do, man?
I don't know what I did with mine. So, public commentary. So we'll wait for the room to clear out. Or-
There's
We
public comment.
have any members of the public? It was easier virtually because there was no one like standing up and making noises and.
Do we want to,
I know, right? Well, maybe I'll do that.
The meeting is continuing. If you guys would like to take your conversation outside, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
I just heard nostalgia for Zoom. That was interesting.
Yeah. Okay, at this point then, if any members of the public who are still here would like to make any other kind of comments, to the board unrelated to this project, please feel free, come up to the microphone, identify yourself. Seeing none, I'll entertain a resolution, a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Mr. Lasso, second,
Seconded.
all in favor?
Aye.
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 See you next week.
I'm so happy to see you all. Face,
Yes,
smiling
that's
faces.
right.
Oh my God.
What a different meeting.
It's lovely.
It's a different meeting. See you next week. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, George.
This is fantastic.